Welcome to the Clause YouTube channel.
Together, we strive for a safer, secure, and more stable world.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Clause official YouTube channel Strategic Frontlines. And today we have Ambassador Gurjit Singh, former ambassador to Germany, ASEAN, and African Union. We have Dr. Vaniki Joshi, who's the assistant professor of and associate dean at School of Management and Entrepreneurship at GNU. And we have Maj Gen RPS Bhadauria, VSM retired, additional Director General at CLOS. And today what we are going to discuss the relevance of G7. And in the second part, we are going to discuss India-Canada relations. Now, coming to G7, we know they are celebrating its 50th anniversary in 2025. And India has now been a regular invitee of G7. I think this is primarily due to India's economic heft, as India is now the world's fifth largest economy, with a GDP larger than 4 of the G7 members. India's rapid economic growth, large market, young workforce, as also its rising global stature, whether it is Indo-Pacific or as a bridge to global south, India has become important for G7. However, G7 itself is undertaking a transformation due to internal and external challenges, whether it is the trade or whether it is the trade war or the emergence of Trump and the Russia-Ukraine war. We find that G7 is going to debate issues which are not only economic related, but also security. There is a kind of geopolitical realignment. So my first question is to General Bhadauria. How do you see the G7 evolving in this multipolar world?
Thank you very much, ma'am. So let me just begin by giving a little background as to how and when did G7 come together, right? It was founded in 1975, and the context was that the forum of the major industrialized economies in a reaction to the oil crisis that was taking place came together. So these countries were essentially European countries and US and Japan. So it was Canada, France, Germany, Italy, UK, Japan, and US. They came together, and initially the heads of the foreign ministers would meet together and decide on the issues. And however, subsequently, the heads of it was elevated to the level of heads of state and heads of government. Now, in 1998, Russia also joined in, and it became G8, which continued for a few years. Now, the thinking that time was because Soviet Russia had broken, so they wanted Russia to join, become G8, although the economy of Russia that time was very, very less. So it was not that economically powerful as other members of G7. However, the thinking was that probably Russia would become more democratic in case we take them in our fold. However, in 2014, when Russia under President Putin annexed Crimea, they were removed from G8. And in Valdai Club discussion, I've heard President Putin saying himself that I used to be called later once G7 countries would decide on everything. So then I would be called in and issues discussed in front of me. So I was more irrelevant than relevant. So this is what the Russians were feeling even then. Now, what we have seen that it has been basically dominated by the Western liberal democracies, and this was once a premium forum for global governance. However, like you said in your opening remarks, now it is facing huge challenges. Now, the challenges are emerging from the emerging powers and the rival blocs to reshape the international order. Now, here I would bring in BRICS. So, in case we compare G7 with the BRICS, which is just about emerging Uh, G7 has got 7 countries, and there are 4 5 other democracies which are invited all the time. India has been one of the regulars right from 2004 to 2005. Our Prime Minister has been regularly attending it. So it is 7 plus 4 5 other democracies. However, BRICS is 10 members already. Indonesia was the one which joined recently, and there are 35 to 36 members who attend their meetings. So see the numbers. Numbers are obviously in favor of BRICS. Population wise, G7 represents just about 10% of the population of the world, whereas BRICS represent 45% of the population. As far as the economy is concerned, G7 has almost about 45% of the world GDP, which amounts to about 45 to 50 trillion dollars, and whereas BRICS is about 30% of the world GDP, which is about 30 to 35 trillion dollars. However, in case we translate this into PPP terms, then the figures look very different. So, in terms of PPP, the BRICS represent almost 60 to 65 trillion dollars worth of the world economy, and 40, that is almost 45% share, whereas G7 would only be 30%. And in case we look at the GDP growth, which is now taking place for last 2 3 years, we'll find that G7 is just about growing at 1.2 or 1.5%, whereas BRICS, led by say India, China, is growing at 3.5 to 4% cumulatively, right? So, and BRICS is also representing the multipolarity and respect for the sovereignty. That is what the nations of the BRICS feel. And also, increasingly, they are saying that we represent the global south. And Russia has come up with the concept of world majority states, which is Eurasian countries, that is Russia, China, India also, and this global south. So that is what they want to represent. Um, it is right now, it is quite heterogeneous, whereas G7 is much more homogeneous grouping. But they do not have a secretariat, and things are decided by consensus. So BRICS is actually evolving. But G7 faces problems, and in case I can just highlight what Trump very recently said, that in case BRICS countries come up with an alternate currency, he would impose 100% tariffs on them. Now imagine, BRICS has got a lot of countries which are strategic partners of US, India, Saudi Arabia, which is not joined but may join, right? ASEAN, Indonesia. So there are a lot of countries which are strategic partners of US. However, these are the kind of threats which Trump has given. And India's position, however, I must clarify, in BRICS has been that it is not anti-West. So India does not see BRICS bloc as anti-West, meaning anti-G7 or whatever. So that is the position. So that is the comparison between G7 and BRICS. I also wish to highlight that in the increasingly changing global order, which may be bipolar to some extent or even multipolar as things go forward, the G7 will have to be also synergizing with G20 countries, because G20 countries represent 85% of the GDP of the world, population almost two-thirds, and trade 75%. So that is far more representative grouping which has emerged. And so G20 has to coordinate, synergize with G7 has to synergize with G20 to remain relevant. So therefore, right now it is too small a grouping for 21st century challenges of the world. So it has to have outreach, it has to adapt, which in some manner it is doing, like they are inviting countries like India, South Africa, Australia, Brazil, Mexico in their meetings, but they have to become little more together. So, in a way, G7 is a good grouping of democratic countries who can come up with some global challenges like climate change, AI, technology, like that. So, here I would just end by just making two very small points. So it can be a network amongst the networks. G7 used to say that we network. So they can be a network amongst the networks, which is G20 and some other groupings. So increasingly, they will have little less modest role than what they were having in past. Now, coming to this meeting, which is going to start from tomorrow in Canada, uh, one factor which would be overbearing would be Trump factor. And why so? Because of the tariffs. And he made a statement that G7 is becoming irrelevant. We should have Russia also being part of it. Very recently, he had said this. And G7 should, in fact, become G10, G11. So, therefore, because of all these issues, there is lack of trust at the highest level, meaning amongst these G7 countries. So let's see how the things go forward. And also, this is happening in the backdrop of the crisis in Middle East, where we are seeing Iran and Israel almost now in a kind of a full-scale war. So I'll stop here, man.
You you very rightly pointed out the difference between the BRICS and G7. And I think G7 countries also realize they need to open up. That is why they are inviting other countries. And G20 is more representative as far as global economies are concerned. And very rightly you pointed out. So this brings me to Ambassador Gurjit Singh. I would like to ask you, what are the key agenda of G7 this year? Especially, we know that there are evolving technologies, climate change, and so many other things what are happening. So, how do you feel? What are the issues that they have taken? And what General Bhadauria also pointed out about the Trump factor. So, how do you think that the G7 are going to navigate this Trump factor in their meetings? Your opinion, please. General Singh, you need to, sorry, Admiral Gurjit Singh, you need to unmute your mic.
Muted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I want to say 3 points before I come to the agenda. The first is that this is a coming out party for the new government of Canada. And they have to deal with global challenges, which is unprecedented, because their main challenge is not coming from Russia or China, but coming from the United States. The second part is that the outreach of G7, as General Bhadauria has explained so well, is essentially to the BRICS members. South Africa, Brazil, India, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, UAE are all BRICS members. It's only Australia which is there because it's a Quad member, and Mexico reluctantly coming because it's part of the old NAFTA. But Saudi Arabia is not coming, and Indonesia is not coming either because he is actually going to meet President Putin. So the centrality which the G7 thought it had, it doesn't have anymore. And that is something Canada will realize. And that is why they want India there, because the heft comes from the large markets, the large economies, and the people who play a role in the G20. And to understand that while we may not have a solution for every problem, they can't solve any global problem without us. I think that is the reality of understanding this. And the third aspect is that the G7, its main agenda actually is to coordinate among each other, because there's so much discordant noise right now. Over Ukraine, there's discordance. Over trade and tariffs, there's discordance. Over Israel, there's discordance. So they need to get their own act together, in which they have to talk much more to each other than to the rest of us. So once I think we understand this, then perhaps we could look at the set agenda. Now, Canada's 3 core missions are protecting communities and global security, in which countering foreign interference and transactional crime is an important aspect. Other one is building energy security and accelerating digital transformation. This includes critical mineral supply chains. Then third is securing future partnerships. The key policy focus areas are alignment of sanctions on Ukraine and Russia. And this is perhaps President Zelensky's last chance to persuade the G7 in the whole to stick by him. Then there is that managing of trade tensions between US and its allies. And finally, on defense spending and NATO alignment, they need to come to a coherence because the Americans make a lot of noise, but NATO countries have picked up their spending and are over 2% to 5%, notably Germany. But what happens to collective burden sharing if there is no collective view of strategic challenges? And I think the two other important points are digital and AI governance and the energy, critical minerals and infrastructure investment. Now, these are really very wide. India is more interested in the last two. We don't want to get involved in the G7's discordant noise among themselves. We want to go with the consensual opinion on AI, digitization, critical mineral and other supply chains. Those are of areas of interest to us. We don't want G7 to make AI rules by themselves. We want it to be in consultation with us. Similarly, as you know that India is working on a European initiative. We believe in multipolarity, in which Europe is an important pole. So within the G7, India is more aligned with the European thought than the North American thought, whether it is the US or Canada for that matter. So I think this support to European thought on these agenda items is what India will be doing. I am not clear to which sessions Prime Minister Modi has been important, but I believe it will be something to do with AI and digitization because that is a non-political but very important functional matter of importance to India. Thank you.
Ambassador Singh, you rightly pointed out firstly that the centrality of the G7 is now being questioned and they are facing a lot of internal challenges, and that is why we feel that the security aspect has come into it, and they're talking about the Ukrainian issues and other things. And the other thing what you highlighted was that we are more closer to the EU thought than the American thought. That is a key point which you have highlighted. And you also spoke about the digital and AI governance. So here I would like to bring in Dr. Joshi. Dr. Joshi, can you highlight how India will be benefited economically in G7, especially in terms of getting access to cutting edge technologies? Will there be opportunities to expand into new markets? And can we attract investments? And as Ambassador Singh pointed out, AI governance and especially the critical mineral sector, which is there. So how do you think we are going to be, G7 is going to help us? Your views.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. Now, when we talk about G7 summit per se, so let me start that whenever few countries or few nations, when they come together, either in a form of summit or in a form of meeting or in the form of conference, their one and foremost agenda is to bring money into their own economy. And when you think of bringing money into your own economy, or when you think of keeping that title of being developed nation as such, then it is not possible to ignore the fifth largest growing economy of the world, that is India. Because India, if you right now see, it is one of the fifth largest growing economy and has one among the highest GDP growth rate. So not only this, India also caters them a very crucial market for various for all these developed countries products and all those things. Also, when you talk about the countries which are already developed and are in the course of development, they focus on few specific points. One is financial health of the country and its nation's people. Another is the actual healthcare system, insurance system, and then IT and services places. But when you focus towards the talking about the first point, that is when you talk about financial building up the financial health and the financial aspect and financial well-being of its people and the society of your own country, then India is one of the country which will offer you affordable technology, AI driven technology. It will offer you affordable workforce and affordable workplaces to achieve that target. Number two, even now India is one of the biggest exporter of pharmaceutical healthcare services. And when I talk about services, I include goods as in healthcare goods, as in medicines, various chemicals, etc., and also healthcare services in the form of insurance services. There are various IT companies who have their major offices and are in India and are dealing with the healthcare services of US, dealing with the healthcare services of Canada, dealing with the healthcare services of Europe, etc. So it offers you a very India is at right now at a very, very crucial position. So every country would try to have a trade and an investment partnership with India. And it is not just a one-way trade agreement, it will be a two-way trade agreement. Because in the past few decades, as India has come up with the concept of Make in India, and you can see that it has steadily risen. And this steadily rise in the investments has been a two-way trade. For example, if we take about country-wise, whether it may be America, whether it may be Europe, European Union as such, whether it may be Germany, whether it may be Canada. So the two-way trade among each of these G7 countries has increased with India. If we talk about Canada, it has increased every year, although keeping the time period of COVID apart. And also, India is right now you can be considered as a hub of supply chain diversification, because every country which are involved in this all the nations which are involved in this G7, they have one thing very steadfast in the back of their mind, is to reduce the dependency on China and Chinese material and Chinese services. So keeping that in mind, and also to reduce the dependency on Chinese technology, Chinese pharmaceutical, etc. Keeping these things in mind, India comes up as a sole option, not sole I would say, but one of the major option in front of them. Because when we talk about management, when we talk about strategy, we say that whenever a country invests in some another country, it does some analysis. So one of the very popular analysis is SWOT analysis, that is a strength, weakness, opportunity, threat. But nowadays each country does a SLEPT analysis, where S stands for social, L stands for legal, P stands for political, E stands for economical, and T stands for technological analysis. So keeping all these parameters in mind, India is one of the country which provides you a very good platform, not only for the goods and services to be exported into this country, because it is nowadays in the world, it will cater to one of the biggest market for all these products, all these international products, all these international services, etc. And also in turn, it will be one of the major exporter, not cheap, but yes, relatively cheap and sustainable goods. Because nowadays when we talk about energy, we talk about transition related to green energy investment. So solar energy, wind energy, and even nuclear energy development, it is nowadays very much in as compared to that of other countries. Also, when we talk about critical mineral and resource security, so India is partnering with all these G7 countries to secure the supplies of various natural resources, whether it may be rare earth metals, whether it may be coal, because being a developing country, we require natural resources. And being one of the fifth largest economy, we are exporting all these finished goods and finished products in the form of goods, in the form of pharmaceuticals, in the form of auto parts, in the form of textiles, in the form of jewelry, in the form of steel, to various countries like America, to various countries like Canada, to various countries like Europe, to various countries like Australia, and so on and so forth. The list goes on. And as rightly said by Sir few minutes back, that the bomb which has been thrown by US about the trade, and since right now we are in the moratorium period of 90 days, so we don't know what will happen once this 90-day period will end, and what will come out of the American government regarding this, taxation policies and all those things. So India is already on on an upfront path to to grab these opportunities. And obviously all the other countries around the world have been seeing that India is one of the sole democratic country which has been stable for a very long period of time, whether you take it economically, whether you take it most importantly politically, having such tumultuous neighborhoods. But yet India has maintained its path of growth. So obviously it provides a very good platform for their investment flow to India, as well as our our products and our leading sectors to export to those countries.
I agree. One major point what came out was that the supply chain dependency on China needs
Yes.
to be, we have to see alternative models. And India comes out as a major country where we can play a major role. Also, you talked about the SLEPT analysis. That is a very important aspect which you highlighted. And this brings me to our other section. That is, if we want to do supply chain, what you call a dependency, we have to break, we have to have more partners. And here I want to bring in the relationship between India and Canada. So we know that there was an initial hiccup as far as the invitation to G7 countries, G7 was involved as far as India was concerned. And in the past also, there have been diplomatic frictions between India and China, and the relation have been tense. But Canada has got a new prime minister, and Prime Minister Carney is very different from Prime Minister Trudeau. In the sense that he's an economist with extensive international experience. So, Ambassador Gurjit Singh, I want to ask you, do you feel that there is an opportunity for both countries to move forward and cement this relationship?
Thank you. So I must say, as a former diplomat, that this is not a position two democratic countries should ever have been. Canada should never have allowed itself to be degraded in Indian policy only next to Pakistan. This is because they used a singular subject and they did not use correct diplomatic means, leading to a total disruption of our relationship. I give credit to Prime Minister Carney that he has taken the initiative. And I think India will respond positively. I don't think India is averse to discussing anything with Canada, provided it is done in diplomatic manner and through diplomatic channels and not through megaphone diplomacy unilaterally. If that lesson has been learnt by Canada, then I think it is not that we will be averse to discussing anything that they want. And as I pointed out to you, that on their agenda itself, transnational crime and foreign interference is there. Now, the problem is that foreign interference always meant Russian or Chinese intervention. but they brought it down to Indian intervention. Now, in return, India curtailed the numbers of diplomats that Canada had, because it was well known that they were poking their nose in through diaspora into Indian politics. So it is not a one-way street. So I think if those lessons have been learned, then we are back to at least a platform where we can both talk. What we need to know, and I think Dr. Joshi has pointed out, that India and Canada are actually important economic partners. And in the current world, where there's a disruption of supply chains, there is deglobalization, and you need a US plus policy. We always talked about China plus one policy. Right now, you need a US plus one policy in which Canada could play a role. The markets which have been close to Canada in the US, India is a part solution to them. So I think we need to look and repair the rupture and get back to the agenda. And the agenda of G7 is a good one, which Canada has set, if they use it to reset the relationship with us. Thank you.
Dr. Joshi, now I would like to call you, as Ambassador Singh was saying, that US plus one policy. I mean, India and Canada, can we come economically closer to fill that gap? Because all the countries in the world are trying to see partners. So can we see a major economic partner in Canada? And do you think that Canada can progress in trade agreements? And what particular sector you think we can work? Can it be IT, pharmaceuticals, engineering services as a major potential sector? Or you feel that there are other sectors also which could be included? Your views.
Okay. So when we talk about development per se, when we talk about countries to move from underdeveloped to developing and from developing to developed and remain developed as such, we always take trade deals from one country to another. And we should always remember that these kind of deals or these kind of trade agreements are always two-way street. So when we talk about India and Canada trade agreement, it has to be a two-way trade where both the parties are equally benefited. Now, when we look into India and Canada and their trade relations together, we see that this trade relation is not just 5 years or 7 years or 8 years old. It has been continued for past many decades. Like if we talk about comprehensive economic partnership agreement, which has been in talk for around, I guess, more than 2 decades, more than 1.5 decades or so. We are still working on it. That's another point. But when we talk about economic partnership, we can see that India for Canada lies among the 9th largest exporter. And for India, Canada is very below the 10th. I guess for us, Canada lies around 14th or 15th in number in terms of export. So if you talk in terms of necessity, India right now is very much necessary for countries like Canada and other countries also like that to continue with their export opportunities and various other things. Now, when we talk about specific sectors, now in case of specific sectors, what Canada can export to India and what it has been exporting to India, it has been exporting its fertilizers, because we must understand that Canada is geographically, it is a very huge area. But population wise, the population, because of the climatic conditions and terrain, only few area is inhabited and rest of the area is forest covered. So it has huge, it has a huge resource of wood and paper. So in turn, what we do, we export from Canada the wood, we export from Canada paper, we export the minerals, the rare earth minerals, which though do exist in India, but still we need something more in abundance, because right now we need to understand that India is a rapidly developing economy. So we are consuming resources more in more manner, in more percentage as compared to other countries. And also looking into the Indian population, so Indian population to grow ahead, we need lots and lots of proteins. Nowadays, there was a saying initially in India, that for a person to grow, he needs roti, kapda and makan. But nowadays, in millennial times, the saying has been changed. It is roti, kapda, roti, makan and protein. So protein nowadays is very, very important. And you will be surprised to know that India also exports protein from Canada in the form of various kinds of pulses. But let me remind you, Canada is not the only option for us. There are also various African countries from which we export pulses. But on the other hand, if we talk the other way, what India is exporting to Canada, we are exporting pharmaceuticals and healthcare services at a very, very affordable cost, which is very difficult for them to achieve from various other places or from any other country they could think of. We are providing them healthcare services in the form of insurance, in the form of post medical services, in the form of development of medical kits, in the form of those heart machines and various other different machines. I'm not a medical person, so I don't know various jargons of those areas. But pharmaceuticals, we are there, one of the very high exporters of auto parts. So we do not export them the complete machinery, we export them the parts. So auto parts, electronics, the cheap electronics, apart from that of China, cheap electronics, affordable electronics, and let me tell you, reliable electronics. Because China, the saying goes that whenever it is made in China, we don't know how many hours or how many minutes it will work. But with India, you can actually rely on that. So we export textiles, and also one thing which we export a lot is steel. So India has been a biggest exporting partner to Canada as well. And all these areas are actually not only help India to grow, but also Canada. And if we look through a period of time, maybe through a period of 5-year or 10-year time period, we can say that this bilateral trade between India and China specifically has actually grown many folds. Keeping, again, I would like to remind you, keeping the COVID period differently, because that was the period where it globally hit the economy. But in general, there has been a steady increase in the trade relations. And that is the reason why in the upcoming talks, there are discussions which will be held related to double taxation avoidance agreements. There will be discussions which will be taken place related to development of economic partnership agreements, etc. So this in turn will help both India and China accordingly.
You rightly pointed out, Dr. Joshi, that there are many areas where we can work together. And pharmaceuticals and healthcare services, we know India has a niche in that, and we are doing it with a lot of countries. So that brings me to another very important question, which I want to ask General Bhadauria. Do you feel that the domestic policy have the potential to derail the relationship, or you feel that mature leaders at the top can navigate deftly through these issues and can work together? Your views, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Firstly, does the domestic politics impact the foreign relations? Yes, it does. And this was very clear in case of Canada, when the previous prime minister, because of the domestic political compulsions and compulsions to run a coalition government along with his other partner who lost the elections very badly, had taken this position that he did against India. So, and in India also, there was some kind of a pushback, and that's why the relations actually nosedives. To say that the local or the domestic politics impacts the international relations would be absolutely correct. Now, here I want to bring in other aspect also, how the domestic politics is going to impact or may impact, is the meeting which may take place between Mr. Modi and President Trump. Maybe a bilateral or on the sidelines. For sure, they are going to be meeting over the during the discussions, right? So there, and this meeting is taking place in the backdrop of two very important events. One is the trade talks that we are having, and on 9th of July, the deadline is ending, and we are sure that we would be able to get some kind of a trade agreement before that. So this would be one backdrop. And the second backdrop would be, which I think would be far more important, would be the kind of statements which President Trump had made in the wake of Operation Sindoor, to say that he was mediating. And even very recently, just a couple of days back, again he said that he would like to mediate between India and Pakistan. And we know the kind of pushback it had in our country, right? Everyone was saying that this is not acceptable to India, including the opposition parties. So therefore, these kind of domestic issues do impact the at least the on the surface the relationship. But you're right that the mature leaders and the mature countries do overcome these, and the fundamental strength of the relationship comes to the fore. Like India and US, the fundamental relations are very strong. We have a very long worldview where our interests converge. So therefore, this is not going to be impacted. And I think same would be true to a great extent as far as Canada is concerned.
Ma'am, we cannot hear you.
I think we have discussed very important things, especially G7 is concerned. What are the challenges it is going to face, and what are the issues, what they are going to highlight. And we also discuss in detail India-Canada relationship. So the point is that it can go on a very positive trajectory, because a lot depends on the mature leadership. Both India and Canada, I feel, are having mature leaders. So let's see how it goes. But we'd like to take few questions. Okay, the first question is by Mr. Akash Thadani. He says that publicly available globally comparable GDP data suggests that Bharat is the third largest economy to be invited to the G7, as we should be a member of it. Your views? Anybody? Dr. Joshi, would you like to take this question?
I think the master would be the right person to answer this.
Ambassador, even you can start.
My apologies if I mentioned the number wrong. I'm so sorry. But
no issues.
Yes, I do agree that India should not be just an invited member, but it should be actually the main member of the G7 summit. But these are more or less the cartels. Because rightly few days back, I was listening to our one of the minister, and he said that these are the cartels which are operating with the idea of supremacy. So just being a part of the cartel, just being a member is not our aim. Let us be very clear about it. Our aim is to establish our global position, so that each and every, whether it may be G5, G7, G8, G9, whatever kind of Gs you can think of, whatever kind of quads you can think of, should understand among themselves that yes, if we have to grow, we have to work with India. Without India, it will become difficult for us to survive economically. Because for any country to grow, for any country to move ahead, it is very important to have a good financial well-being, to have a good economical well-being. And when I say good economical well-being, good economical relations with other countries. So India needs to so every country needs to understand that India is that new safe haven for all those countries, considering the global tumultuous aspect of America, where one day the tariffs will be zero and another day the tariffs will be maybe 200% or 200%. And considering India is not even a closed economy like China, so India is something which will cater everyone and will help everyone, considering you bring a friendly hand.
Ambassador Gurjit Singh, would you like to comment something?
Yeah, so I don't think it's a joke. I think it is serious business. And I think you have to understand that the G7 are all American and NATO allies. Even Australia is not a member of G7, though it's an American ally. So I think you need to get your structures understood clearly. Secondly, no BRICS member can be a G7 member. So I think we have chosen the path of strategic autonomy, which allows us to be consulted by G7 on important occasions. But we are a charter member of the G20. So I think we are fine where we are. And I don't think India wants to be a member of the G7. We are okay the way we are. Thank you.
With US-Canada relation facing new friction and the loss of Biden as White House ally, is Canada's Carney now forced to reconcile with India on our terms in order to keep its position viable? Ambassador Singh, and then General Bhadauria, whatever you feel like.
So I think we are seeing this question as too much of a binary.
Yes.
Everything
Absolutely.
doesn't work as, black and white. There are a lot of gray. I think we are increasing the gray, as I explained in my remarks earlier. So there are US-Canada relations which are actually much more serious than the divergences in US-India policy.
Yes.
Right? Secondly, just as Biden, we lost as an ally, we lost, Canada lost, is not, the United States is still our friend. But it is not the friend who's doing everything we want them to do or Canada wants to do. Yes, so therefore there needs to be some mutual understanding between India and Canada, like we are enhancing that between India and Europe.
Yes.
The divergences between the Western countries is opening up opportunities for India. And if Europe, Canada, and others grasp it, yes, India is ready to work on them. I don't think this can be classified as our term or their terms. It has to be a mutuality of terms.
You rightly pointed out, it can't be in binaries. And India-US relationship, a lot have been said. But I think in long term, it is going to work and it is going to be strengthened as days pass on. General Bhadauria, what would you like to say? Please unmute your mic.
No, I agree with Ambassador. One is no country is forced to do anything. When the interests converge, then they have the relationship going. And the fundamental interest between India and Canada and India and US are there a lot of convergences. So therefore, this bilateral relations will go on, and temporary hiccups in case some leader has an issue would always be there. But we have to see long term. Long term, these bilateral relations would only progress and not go back.
That's absolutely correct. And any last words from the panelists before we close down? Starting with Ambassador Gurjit Singh.
Well, I think they say that globally we live in interesting times. And now the problem that Israel has with the Palestine, and now that the problem they have with Iran, this is going to create greater cleavages within the G7, particularly between the Europeans, Canada, and the United States. And I think the BRICS countries who are like us, who are on there, I think we have different views. So I think we are in for a very politicized, geopoliticized session than a geo-economic session of the G7 this time.
Very well said. And they had stated that the economy and security both will be taken together So, Dr. Joshi, quick last word. You want to say anything?
Without economy, no institution, no nation can sustain. So economics will always be there, whether you say it out loud or whether you don't. And India having an upper hand in the present scenario with all the ongoing our aggressive our aggressive international relations and our aggressive ongoing processes, it has India has created its own niche in the world, so which will help India, and all the other countries, the developed as well as the developing nations, will always want to have a positive relation with India. So, in this upcoming conference, we will look towards that only.
General Bhadauria?
All that I have to say is that India is doing a very difficult task very well.
Yes.
That is having a strategic autonomy and balancing everything so very well. We are part of BRICS, we are part of Quad, and we are also being invited to G7. So this speaks. We are not too hyper, and also we are very focused on our national interest. That is our development to become what the Prime Minister says, a Viksit Bharat by 47. So we do not want to be derailed from this kind of a national venture, and therefore we are balancing every interest. And I think the path that we have chosen and what we are following is the excellent path to follow.
Very well said. I think India is one of the few countries who had good relation with most of the countries. For example, we take Israel and Iran. We have good relation with both the countries, and we are ready to mediate between them. And I hope that crisis also subsides and it doesn't spiral on. So thank you so much, Ambassador Gurjit Singh, Dr. Vaniki Joshi, and General Bhadauria for this podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.